I'm so tired. I just finished watching Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness because it just came out on streaming today and I figured might as well. I had tried to avoid spoilers other than the trailer and some things that I could glean from previous installments in the ongoing Marvel cinematic monopoly over our entire media culture. There are parts of the movie that are really fun. Sam Raimi's a good director, and where he is allowed to imprint on the movie, it's got some good energy. Gives you vibes of the Dr. Octopus Awakens scene in Spider-Man 2 with some first-person camera stuff. There's some really cute CGI work with the magic that Doctor Strange and others use in the movie. There's a particularly neat little sequence that doesn't make very much sense but involves like music as magic. Speaking of the CGI, I should start there. The CGI in the first half of this movie, at least, is inexplicably terrible. This has been a thing that's been talked about a lot recently, I think, that for a number of reasons, modern movies, modern blockbuster tentpole movies, really wait until the last possible second and spend the least possible amount of money on CGI, even as they are CGI-dependent, effects-heavy spectacles. It's a thing where you want to give theoretical control to other parts of the production, so you essentially let directors, producers, whatever, whoever, I don't know anything about how you make films. Anyway, basically put all the onus on already overworked, underpaid CGI artists to try and make something decent. There are things about the early CGI in Doctor Strange that I don't hate, Shuma Gorath being one of them. Shuma Gorath was the best character in the Marvel vs. Capcom games, which is the only way I know who he is. Somebody on Twitter told me it's not Shuma Gorath. I don't care. It's tentacles and a big eye, and he looks sad when he gets his tentacles cut off and his eye gets all big and the pupil dilates and I want to hug him. So he's good, but he also doesn't feel like he's actually part of the physical space of the world. Every scene involving him and someone else feels really weightless. Something about the way that the wide shots are done feels really green screeny. I don't even know. I'm sure some of this was done on some kind of locations, but a lot of it feels really flat. The CGI looks better later in the movie when you can start to see more of Raimi's imprint, but also the story takes a, like, not exactly that much more inventive turn, but it takes a turn where it gets to be a little more playful visually, at least. The weightlessness, though, is like, this movie has no stakes, or at least it doesn't feel like it has stakes, despite being a movie about the multiverse and the fate of all universes. The whole concept of the multiverse is basically used as the same kind of MacGuffin as the Infinity Stones in the Infinity War saga, whatever, phase 2, whatever we're calling that. I'm so tired. I don't really care that much about the CGI, to be honest with you. The movie leans into it. Honestly, it actually feels in a good way similar to Spider-Man 2, where that movie is aware that its CGI isn't real. It's not tricking you, so it's not really trying to trick you. It's cartoony. It's light. But then the movie throws in wildly higher stakes than I think it knows how to support tonally. It feels like you're filling the Marvel universe needs to have cut to camera joke quota without thinking about where or why you're putting it in the movie. The movie actually has this constantly with Strange and Wong having little asides in the middle of really horrifying situations. Even as the visuals sort of vacillate back and forth, they're fundamentally cartoony, sort of goofy, intentionally played up, I think, compared to some other movies like this. It actually helps a little some of the action scenes, which are a little more readable despite all the CGI, I think in part because Raimi's giving it a little more of an eye towards this is supposed to be fun and silly. No one's going to think this is real. We are zapping red lights against gold and purple lights. No one cares about this. They care about the emotional stakes. The movie doesn't have many of those, but it at least knows not to try to replace them with treating goofy stuff seriously. I would say this movie suffers from me having just recently seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, but I think this movie suffers on its own without that comparison. Honestly, that comparison's really stupid. The movies have almost nothing to do with each other except that they use that same terminology, though it's a useful comparison to think about the difference between what Marvel is doing and what films can do with like concepts. Because the multiverse is an interesting concept and it leads to a lot of obvious thematic, emotional narrative beats about what if, regret, imposter syndrome, and the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once is about all of those things pretty explicitly and a lot of other things. Let me back up for a second. If you like this movie, that's fine. If you love this movie, that's also fine, though I find that a little weird considering you're loving a movie where all of the emotional stakes, except for one new side character, rely on you having watched other properties and remembering details from those properties. The thing is, like, I have all these things that I want to complain about with this movie, and I felt this way coming out of the latest Spider-Man 2, of a lot of these things that feel really silly and like nitpicks, and I'm not bothered by plot holes, so I don't care about the logistics of what's going on here. I had a couple moments as I was watching the movie of like, shouldn't they know better than to, but I think my problem is that the story being told here, the themes being addressed here, probably weren't worth the amount of money that this movie cost. I'm gonna look it up right now, actually, because I didn't look it up before this. Google's garbage these days, by the way. Doctor Strange 2 cost 200 million USD to make. For comparisons, I guess the latest Spider-Man cost that much. Avengers Endgame cost $350 million roughly. Everything Everywhere All at Once cost $25 million. I will say that some of the emotional beats in this movie do kind of land, specifically around Wanda, but they come after she does several things that don't feel earned based on what we know about her prior to the events of this film. The movie kind of has to do this weird forwards then backwards then forwards thing with her to justify where she's at. This movie's fine. It's fine. It's fine that it exists. It's fun. It's not a bad movie. It's got a really good cast, which makes sense with the budget it's working with. It's directed by somebody who knows how to do kinetic storytelling, and so it's got a lot of fun beats in it. Some of the stuff doesn't really land that well, but who really cares? If this were like the storyline of a comic or a cartoon show or a mini series even, I would probably be cool with it. But the thing is, like, movies can do so much, film can do so much. Blockbusters have such a crazy opportunity to do wild stuff with storytelling that you've never seen before, because it's a unique combination of a medium and a scale, a budget that allows for things you've never seen before. I think what bothers me, and the reason why I bothered to make this video about a movie I would probably give like 2.5 to 3 stars if I were a movie critic, I think 20 years ago, this movie was for me. I think the last superhero movie that felt like it was for me was like The Dark Knight, which I now have very mixed feelings about. But at the time, I think I saw the movie 4 times on opening weekend, which is more days than a weekend usually has, but I think I managed that. But the Marvel movies, which really should be right in my wheelhouse because X-Men and Marvel were the things I cared about as a kid, these movies do nothing for me, and they do less for me as time passes. It's not that Marvel movies aren't trying to be good. I'm not trying to echo the parodic version of what people think Martin Scorsese said. There's just so many other stories you can tell than superhero movies. These movies are for everybody. They're meant to be for everybody. And by being for everybody, they aren't trying to do certain things. Specifically, what they aren't trying to do almost ever is have any moral complexity or thematic depth beyond a certain point. And even all that would be fine, but all of this energy is being spent creating this perpetual motion machine of franchising and the same kind of superhero movies, and I'm so bored. This is like the 700th example of a movie that's like, look, a new character that you probably don't even know unless you read a comic book back in 1998. But look, it's a new guy. It expects all of its like juice to come from people looking for Easter eggs and looking for clues and examining and being excited about the next thing. It's all a tease for the next thing. It's not interested in telling an exciting story. It's barely interested in telling a story. There are good stories in it. There are good movies in it. I'm not saying those movies shouldn't exist. I'm saying we don't need to keep making them at the expense of everything else. I don't understand how we can think of these movies as culturally significant when all they are doing is repackaging themselves into smaller boxes. You know, if you think of it as a genre, then blockbusters have been creatively bankrupt for a pretty long time while simultaneously sucking all of the oxygen out of the room for projects that might actually have something to say, something creative to do, were they given the budget and the opportunity. Movies can do so much. Movies have so much emotional power, and the most exciting things movies could do is to keep trying new ideas. New is, of course, a relative term. Everything Everywhere All at Once is very deliberately a pastiche of previous ideas. I said before, $200 million for Doctor Strange, $25 million for Everything Everywhere All at Once. I will happily take 8 Everything Everywhere All at Onces, Everything's Everywhere's All at Onces, for one of these Doctor Strange movies. Break up the banks is, I guess, my point. What they should do is they should make like 4 more Morbius movies until Sony is completely 6 feet under into the ground, destroyed by their chasing of the meme cycle of Morbius. That should become the emblem, like the totem at the top of the gravestone of superhero movies. Here lies Jared Leto's Morbius. Anyway, Doctor Strange was fine. Go watch it on Disney+. It immediately started playing Miss Marvel after I finished it, so I guess go watch that too. What I'm saying is they should take all the money that they're going to use to make Doctor Strange 3, and instead they should make Marvel vs. Capcom 4, bring me more Shuma Gorath.